here live, and that is because I don't have any more storage on my phone, and I'm still deciding what pictures I want to keep and what I want to give away. Now, I have tried everything over the past month to move all of my pictures to a hard drive and to do life that way. But the problem with that is I can't find a way to connect my iPhone to my hard drive, etc., etc. And so then I was going to try to move my photos to Google Drive, but then if I then delete the photos off my phone, then it'll delete off Google Drive, so I have to fix my settings there. And then I was trying to move stuff to my actual drive and it just wasn't working. So it has been a hot mess trying to get videos out for the past couple of days, but as the church folks say, it's just the devil doing what he do. And at the end of the day, we always have a workaround. Okay, so you can't ever really stop me when there's something that I want to do. Okay, so these next few videos are going to be me sharing directly from the notes and things that I have. I'm sorry that this video is already 2 minutes long, or I'm already 2 minutes in and I still haven't gotten to it. But I did want to share some things with y'all. So this video is really just going to be a chat about some of the things that have been coming to mind for me lately. So I started a Substack, and a Substack, I will have it linked in the description if I remember to do so. But it's just a place where I am now going to be posting a lot of the things that and thoughts that I usually share with myself, short stories, things like that, essays, articles, things that interest me, and I write about it. Typically they stay in the drafts, but Substack is a platform that I found out recently from another YouTuber that I've been following for some time now, and I had always heard her talk about it, but I never saw her actually I just decided to make an account and go in there and follow her. And I was like, this is exactly what I have been looking for the past year. Being a place where you can publish your writing. So if you are a writer, and for me, writing has always been something that I do. Like, it doesn't matter what mood I'm in. It doesn't matter where I'm at in life. I always find a way to write, and I have kept my journals and things like that for literal years. Like, I still have my journals all the way back until I was about 8 or 9. So as you can imagine, moving for me is always a feat, because if it's one thing that I always want to keep, it's my journals. Don't ask me why, but that is just always how I've been. So one of the things that I have been writing about recently is how your biggest triumphs are discovered when you are at your absolute lowest. Your biggest triumphs, meaning not the peak of who you are, but typically when you are in that valley experience of life, when you are in that dark night of the soul, that is when you start to discover who you really are, what your gifts really are, and things like that. And a lot of people think that those things come to you when you're at the peak of your blessings, but that's typically when you're at your most ignorant. The peak of your blessings, or when you're going through a season of abundance or a season of blessings, that's either after you've already been through that dark night of the soul, or that's during a period of time where you're in your bliss is ignorance and ignorance is bliss type of phase. But when you're in the valley, those are when your biggest triumphs are becoming known to you. It's when you are tested and when you realize your strengths and where your resiliences lie. And so one of the things that I was writing about is cognitive distortions. So like the things that we tell ourselves about ourselves that are not true. I've been doing a lot of writing over on Substack about imposter syndrome. So if you, again, want to check out my Substack, or just want to refreshingly engage in something different other than YouTube, and you like reading, I would suggest you make an account if you like writing over there. But anyway, so what does distort mean, right? Distort means to twist or to alter something out of its natural or original state. One common cognitive distortion. So, cognitive, we're talking about the brain, we're talking about the way the brain thinks, the way the brain moves, not physiologically, but cognition. So, the brain in its totality, right? One common cognitive distortion that I have is thinking that nobody really likes me and that everyone is just faking it, including friends, relationship partners, at work, parents even. I went through this with literally every other person in my life. And yeah, that's real. That's really something that I experience and something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So when I was writing this, I said I'm looking at a chart of 6 types of cognitive distortions, and I feel like I do almost all of these on a daily basis. So it had all these different things like perfectionism, self-doubt, da da da. I often jump to conclusions, usually negative conclusions, if I'm being honest, with little or no evidence. This hasn't served me in a few ways. Number one being that when I actually am right about a feeling that I have, I can't really give credence to the thought or the feeling because I think that I'm wrong. Jumping to conclusions makes it so I don't or can't really trust myself. I'm very imaginative, me personally, and I'm pretty good at making up shit and really good at creating narratives. Hence why I've always been a decent writer. I never before now have considered that I could tell these narratives to someone other than myself. And oftentimes, these inferences I'm making about my situation, my relationships, my interpersonal relationships, and stuff like that are stories that I told to myself where I was the villain, the loser, the failed one, etc. And not often was I really telling myself stories where I was the winner, the helper, the victor, the protagonist. You do yourself nor anyone else around you. This is what I really wanted y'all to get, is that you really, if you are like me and you related to the words that I just said, you really don't do yourself or really anybody around you any favors when you don't tell yourself narratives constantly without seeing yourself as the protagonist in your own story. So if you, like most of us, we all have an internal script, right? We all have an internal narrative. And if you are constantly making yourself the villain or anything other than the protagonist in your own internal narrative, you're not doing yourself a favor. But then by you not doing yourself that favor of seeing yourself in the best light that you possibly can, you're doing everyone else around you a very terrible favor as well. I mean, it's not a favor, but you're doing them a disservice just as much as you're doing yourself a disservice. You do yourself the disservice, period, but it also, you have to be mindful that it affects other people around you. And I know a lot of people around this time, they have issues with really understanding the fact that their actions do affect other people. And this is why I said that narcissism and calling everyone around you a narcissist, or having this mentality where now you think that everybody is a narcissist, or this particular type of person is a narcissist and that particular type of person is a narcissist. I'm not even saying that you're wrong, but that mindset is putting you in a scenario where you have no control, where you have no power in the situation, where you're giving the power away to all the other people that you're calling a narcissist, and you're making it so that you are not really the protagonist in your own story. You're making it so that you are like somebody that needs to be helped or rescued or something like that. And that's not who we are. That's not how I operate. That's some victim mentality shit where you start thinking that everything is being done by everybody else and it has nothing or very little to do with you and what you actually do and how you actually can control and change your own internal narrative. The protagonist, as we know, is not always right and is sometimes close enough to the villain to where you can't really tell the antagonist and hero apart. Think of movies, right? In every modern movie with a protagonist and something that they now call like the anti-hero or the positive antagonist or whatever, they start to blend, and you start to realize that a lot of these stories are being more obvious with the fact that the hero and the antagonist, or the protagonist and the antagonist, typically are very, very similar. But you get to a point where you start to realize that the difference between the protagonist and the antagonist, because there's always a point in the movie where they meet and they mirror each other in some type of way. But then you realize that the difference is that the hero is someone who takes accountability, and the hero is not somebody that is living in imposter syndrome. Or if they were, when they saw the antagonist and the antagonist held that mirror up to them, they realized that they were not somebody unworthy of being in the position that they are in. They had to take accountability for the chosen one position that they consider themselves to be in, and they had to realize, hey, this is who I am. The difference between you and me is that I know who I am, and I know my role in this whole thing. And I'm not somebody that's thinking that everything is happening to me, but yet I'm somebody who realizes my role in it, and who realizes that I have the power to control and change everything that's happening. Okay? So, your biggest blessings come from your darkest and lowest moments. And something that I feel like a lot of people struggle with is owning their darkness, owning the nasty, negative, dirty, dusty, disgusting things about themselves and about their character and about their life experiences and all of that. And I'm not saying that from a pedestal. I'm saying that from somebody that shied away from a lot of the darker parts of my life. I blocked out a lot of the trauma. I blocked out a lot of stuff. And so when it all came back to me, I had to realize that I had to own it, because otherwise it was literally going to kill me. It was going to send me to a point where I wanted to unalive myself. It was going to send me to a point where I was not trying to be here, y'all. And that wasn't cool, because I knew that that's not the course of action that my life is supposed to take. It's not going to be taken out by some demons or some whatever that whose goal probably is to make sure that I don't see my path through, at least as far as I'm on this earth plane. You get what I'm saying? Your demons, the darkness, the dark parts about you, in the colloquial sense of like negative, less desirable things like that, those are the things that are supposed to teach you. They have a place and a benefit in our lives as well. And when you're dealing with imposter syndrome, you tend to think that, like for me, something that I experienced a lot was feeling like in my romantic relationship, and it never happened with anybody else before the romantic relationship that I'm in now. It never happened. I can't attribute these emotions to any other relationship that I've had in my life, romantically. But I've experienced it with friends. Like I said, I've experienced it with my parents. I've experienced it, in different ways. And in this relationship that I'm in now, one of the things that I began struggling with after, it wasn't from the beginning. It was when I let people know, like, we had already been through our honeymoon phase. We had already been through all of that. I am a private person. I don't like a whole bunch of people, because of experiences I had had with relationships in the past. I didn't like a whole bunch of people even really too much knowing that I was in a relationship. And thank God I was with somebody who also understood that, even though he isn't that way. He has never been somebody that tried to hide the fact that he was in a relationship or anything like that. I never tried to hide it, but it just wasn't something that I put on Front Street. Like, I'm a post my man on IG and all of that type of girl, typically. Because I had just had poor experiences with that in the past, and I understand how opening your relationship up to those types of things, you'll be surprised at the people who are watching, who want what you have and things like that. But anyway, so where was I going with that? So one of the things that I had experienced in our relationship, once we had been through the honeymoon phase, we had did all that, and then I had just started telling people in my life that we were in a relationship. And I was like, yeah, and I didn't hide it. I just was like, yeah, we've been together. We go together like that. Like, it ain't just started. We're rock solid. Once I know that we're rock solid or whatever, then I'm gonna start telling people. So that was kind of the situation. And ironically, around the time that I started opening my relationship up to other people and getting to know all of that, is when I started to feel this imposter syndrome. And it's when I started to feel like I did not belong, or like my flaws, my darkness, that my demons, whatever, were going to be discovered in some way. And he was going to decide that he didn't want to be with me anymore. Or he, like, I'll leave it there, because that was pretty much where I was coming from. And so I would see, like, I would compare myself. I would start to feel like I was not good enough. And there were other people that he had in his life that, once he figured out that I wasn't perfect and he got rid of me, then these other people would come in and they would, take my spot. You know what I'm saying? So I'll get into that. But that was kind of how I felt. So I didn't realize that was imposter syndrome until more recently. And it was because imposter syndrome puts you in a cycle. And I wrote it down. But it's a cycle, and it's one of those cycles where I feel like you also can flip back and forth. So it's not a perfect cycle. It's like you can jump around to any of the 4 points. But imposter syndrome talks about perfection, or you can understand that you might be dealing with imposter syndrome if you find yourself people pleasing, which I have videos about, perfectionism, which I have videos about, procrastination and paralysis. And that is the cycle: perfectionism, paralysis, people pleasing, and procrastination. And it goes around and around and around, and it jumps back and forth. So you might jump from perfectionism to procrastination, from procrastination to paralysis, from people pleasing to paralysis to perfectionism. It really does not matter. You can find yourself at any point on that wheel and identify that you might be dealing with a bit of imposter syndrome. But what you have to realize is that above a lot of the esoteric implications of these things, because I don't want this particular video to be too esoteric, I would be happy to get into that, but I try to have this channel be more practical. So I was afraid of this darkness that I had within me. Like I said, colloquial darkness, not real darkness, because darkness is a place for you to create. And that's kind of what I want to flip to. So it was darkness, and I saw it as something negative. It was my negative experiences. It made me feel like a void. It made me feel like less of a person, less worthy of respect and attention, things like that. And I gave y'all my romantic relationship and things that I have been going through in real life, and experiencing in very real life. Like, this ain't no cap, okay? So what you have to understand is that these moments of darkness are really just moments for you to learn, because darkness really isn't darkness and evil and bad and whatever. It can feel that way because of things that create these dark places in our bodies, and where we store our trauma, and what makes our hearts heavy and things like that. These things they can weigh you down. I mean, they can make your heart heavy, like I said. And you have to realize that this darkness is really a place for you to create from. So there is a reality that you want for your life, right? There's a reality that I want for my life. And there are plenty of realities that we both can acknowledge that we don't want. I know I'm really good at saying, hey, I don't want this to happen. I don't want that to happen. No, I can't see this happening. I can't see that happening. But it's much harder for us to articulate the things that we do want, right? But we know the reality that we want, but we have to know that we know. We have to be intentional with the reality that we are trying to create. If you feed those demons, okay, if you feed that darkness instead of converting it into a place of transmutation so that you can create from it, then you are reacting to the reality that you don't want. There are plenty of videos and people talking about this now, and I like to see it because people are talking about how you react. And the reason why you're probably not getting the things that you want is because you're reacting to a reality that you don't want. And a lot of people say you should ignore stuff. And me, somebody who is a little neurotic, to be honest, and tends to be sometimes a bit emotionally reactive, I tend to react to things that I don't want to happen. So if it reminds me, quacks like a duck, barks like a duck, if it reminds me of something that I don't want to happen, I react to it, which is not what you should do. If you are aware of realities that you don't want to happen, and then something in this reality starts quacking like a duck, it's yellow like a duck, all of that, and you start to feel like you got to react to it because you see it happening in your 3D, and it's reminding you of something that you don't want to happen, you reacting to it is helping to create it. Please understand that. It's helping to create it. Okay? It's helping to create it. Now, I'm going to talk to my ladies really quickly, and I'm just going to read. Actually, you know what? Nah, I might close this one out. So, imposter syndrome and being emotionally reactive can go hand in hand, okay? Because when you start to feel like you're in a setting and you feel like you don't deserve it, you feel like you're not really meant to be there, you feel like everybody else has it figured out but you feel like, whatever. Studies show that so many people deal with this. But yet and still it happens to all of us more and more and more. And I know for me, it has kept me in quite a karmic cycle, because I have been feeling like I am not where I get to points where I start feeling like I'm not worthy of anything that's happening in my life. Anything. And that is a dangerous place to be, because as a creator, why what is happening in your psyche when you are literally creating the life that you want, and then things happen, energies are around you, things shift where you start to feel like you are not deserving of the things that you yourself have created. There is an incongruency there. That means that something is wrong. And it's not something wrong with you, but there's something wrong with your creative process. What takes place when you start reacting to the realities that you don't want? There's a certain level of cognitive dissonance that takes place. Hold on, I wrote something a few days ago. Why I don't consider delusional to be an insult, okay? And why delusional might be a compliment, okay? So being delusional is okay because it's not really an insult. When you grow up thinking you are crazy, it becomes a fear, okay? I've had some pretty awful experiences growing up, to the point where I felt like I was a Looney Tune. Okay. I felt like something was wrong with me inherently and that it would never change. And I took myself to many, many therapists, and not that I'm against therapy, but therapy didn't help me because I had imposter syndrome. So I would get up in that therapist's office and I would cap and I would lie. And any time where I would start to feel vulnerable, I would start to feel like, I would start to put on. And so it was hard to really crack the egg that was me, because I was so focused on trying to come off perfect. And even in therapy, it was hard to really break that. And it was just because I was so fearful that the true me, the real me, without putting on airs and things like that, was insane. Okay, and I was afraid of that because I had literally been told that something was wrong with me, but no one ever really took the time to identify what it was. They just would say it, and they knew that after a while, any insinuation that I was mentally unstable would send me into a spiral, to where I would start digging and digging and digging into myself and tearing myself apart, trying to figure out what was wrong. And it wasn't nothing wrong. Okay, so it was just one big illusion. But when you grow up thinking that you are crazy, it becomes a fear. You then search every nook and cranny of yourself to figure out what is wrong with you, tearing yourself apart, trying to be perfect. Nitpicking and overanalyzing yourself, you fear the idea that something is wrong with you. I've been to therapy so many times trying to overanalyze myself, to the point where I feared opening up and being real and honest with my struggles. unaware of the fact that when I did finally find myself safe enough with someone to open up, I realized that my experiences aren't as uncommon as I thought, and that it was okay to not be perfect. Now, I put number 2, but essentially, you get called crazy. So, one of the things that also happens in this psyche phenomena that I'm breaking down right now, because I feel like I'm a bit all over the place in this live stream, but it's just because it was all connected. This was a train of thought that I've been having over the past week that I've been trying to break down, because it's what I do, girl. I dig, okay? I dig and I dig until I feel like I've hit a fossil. And once I find that fossil, I used to want to be an anthropologist, y'all. So that's why I'm using this analogy. But once I dig and dig, I try to get to the root of whatever it is that I was experiencing. And a part of it is so that I can relate to others, because I spent so much time thinking that I was so different from others, and not like I'm different and I'm one of the cool girls. No, I felt like I was a literal alien, like something was wrong with me. And so it feels good to just come in here and share. And even if it's just one person that watches it, I know you feel me. You get what I'm saying? So I put number 2. I think number 1 was just talking about, searching every nook and cranny of yourself to find something wrong. But when you also grow up in an environment where you get called crazy and mentally ill so much, even as a child, that you, of course, begin to believe it a little bit. It doesn't just roll off the back, okay? This is now something that is ingrained into your psyche. It's a spell. If you want to be honest, it is a spell, and it is some cold work. But it almost becomes irrelevant to you. So there was a point in time in my life where I became desensitized to the notion that something might be wrong with me, which probably was for the best. So you begin to move on, not really caring if you are or not. You begin thinking the worst, pushing your mind to the limit to test your own sanity. So one of the things in that perfectionism, procrastination, paralysis, and people pleasing. So I would say that people pleasing and perfectionism are married in that cycle. And then paralysis and procrastination are also married, which they describe two different things, but they are similar in terms of the behavior, and they tend to be polar opposites. So when I was in my paralysis stage, I was testing the limits of my own sanity, because after so many times of being called crazy and nuts, because what would happen is I would tell the truth about the things that I was experiencing and the abuse that was happening in my household, right? And because it was only happening to me, it was, and the reality was, it wasn't only happening to me. It was happening to everyone in the home. Okay, this person was a menace. And so I was the only one that would speak up and wouldn't just coalesce and go with it. And so what I noticed is that would, of course, make me a target and things like that. So then I would get called this, and that, and the third. And after so many years, once I had gotten to be like 15, I started pushing my sanity to the limit. I started doing things that it was like, okay, if I'm a nutter butter, then let me go ahead and act a fool. Let me do all the drugs that are in front of me. And not that I was out here doing anything, y'all, but I started smoking weed pretty early, because I'm like, shit, I mean, I don't see the problem with it. I started drinking early, okay, and just engaging in riskier behaviors, still within limits, but when I'm talking about psychologically speaking, I would do things that tested my own sanity, because I was like, if I'm really crazy, then this is what's gonna set me off, and it never did. Okay, as many bongs, as many bottles of alcohol, like, it never sent me to the place that I thought that I was at mentally. Does that make sense? Somebody out there feels me. So that was kind of all I have written there, but I just wanted to kind of add that because I felt like that was a necessary piece of some of the imposter syndrome that I've been breaking down. But if there's anything that I said in this video that you can relate to or that you find interesting, please leave a comment below. I mean, I know we chatted about a lot, but it pays to be aware. In conclusion, it pays to be aware of some of the cognitive distortions and the root of these things. That was just an unpacking of me personally, and I'm somebody who, I mean, I've never really been, I like to be aware of what's happening to me, but I've never been ashamed or fearful of how I appear. I think that's one of the benefits. There's another side of me that is hyper aware of how I appear in other senses, and so where I'm at in life now is trying to find a balance of that. But when we talk about the cycles of imposter syndrome and flipping back and forth between paralysis and perfectionism, people pleasing and procrastination, you find yourself at a certain point just being exhausted of it all, and you're gonna have to make a decision about what it is that you want with your life and what it is and where it is that you are trying to go with your life, because otherwise you are living for someone else and someone else's idea, who doesn't matter, who gonna die just like you are, and they don't matter at the end of the day. So why spend your time trying to aim and strive for that? I mean, if you ask me, it's just silly. Okay, it is silly. No, we're not doing that. If you ask me, it is a waste of your time. Okay, and this is once again just a chat, but if there's something that you resonated with, please let me know. I like feedback. Like I said, these videos are usually just thoughts I would share with myself, and I quite literally was reading from my journal. So yeah, I'm gonna end this live, y'all. Bye.